Lil Durk's federal case just took a turn that could change the courtroom strategy. And if you only saw the old headlines, you missed it. Federal prosecutors added a new murder in aid of racketeering, or VICR, charge against Durk in June 2026, along with a conspiracy to commit stalking count. Prosecutors are now trying to frame the alleged violence as part of a larger criminal enterprise, not one isolated incident. But here's where King Von enters the conversation again. The government's broader theory connects the alleged 2022 Los Angeles attack to retaliation surrounding Von's 2020 killing. Durk has denied that he financed, ordered, or directed violence, and his attorneys have attacked the prosecution's case. Now the timing gets crazier. The new charges arrived weeks before Durk's scheduled federal trial. And when prosecutors tried to keep the new Chicago-related allegations tied to the upcoming Los Angeles trial, the judge pushed back. That decision matters. On July 14, 2026, Judge Michael Fitzgerald granted Durk's motion to sever, meaning the newly added Chicago-related counts will be tried separately. His Los Angeles murder-for-hire trial remains scheduled for August 20th. That's why people are watching this case again. The government expanded the allegations, the defense fought back, and the judge split the case. And there's one question hanging over everything. Will prosecutors be able to use the larger alleged enterprise theory to connect the dots they believe lead back to the retaliation narrative surrounding King Von? Or will the defense successfully keep those pieces separated? Because this is no longer just about an old headline. The case is moving toward trial, the charges have changed, and the courtroom strategy has changed with them. And if you thought the King Von connection was finished, this latest development explains why people are looking at the case again. Just remember, these are allegations, and Lil Durk is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Lil Durk's case just changed again, and if you have been following this story, there's one detail you absolutely need to understand before the August courtroom battle begins. Federal prosecutors added new racketeering-related charges in June, including allegations tied to a broader criminal enterprise. Then, on July 14th, Judge Michael Fitzgerald granted Durk's request to have those new counts tried separately. That sounds like a legal technicality, but trust me, it changes the battlefield. The first twist: the new charges are not simply disappearing. They were severed, not dismissed. Those counts can still be pursued separately later. For Durk, that is a pre-trial win because the August 20th trial will now focus on the original Los Angeles murder-for-hire allegations instead of bringing the newer Chicago-related allegations into the same courtroom. His lawyers have maintained that Durk is innocent. This is where King Von's name comes back into the conversation, but the facts matter. Prosecutors have built a broader narrative around retaliation after Von's 2020 killing, while the current Los Angeles case centers on an alleged 2022 attempt targeting Quando Rondo that resulted in the death of his cousin, Xavier Robinson. Durk has pleaded not guilty. So the ruling does not prove what happened to Von. What it does show is that the government's larger theory has become a major battleground before trial. That matters because prosecutors wanted evidence involving alleged violence in Chicago and an older Atlanta shooting to remain connected to the federal case. Durk's defense argued that adding those allegations so close to trial would fundamentally change the case they had spent months preparing to fight. The judge separated the new racketeering counts. The prosecution has not lost those allegations, but it cannot pile everything into the August trial. The surprising part is this: the upcoming trial is actually becoming narrower while the overall legal situation remains complicated. 4 original counts are scheduled to go before a jury on August 20th. The severed racketeering counts remain pending for a possible later trial. Durk did not walk out free, and the case was not thrown away. He won a procedural battle that could make the first trial more focused. That creates a different courtroom question. Can prosecutors prove the allegations in the original murder-for-hire case without relying on the newer racketeering allegations? The jury will consider that based on the evidence presented. The defense, meanwhile, gets a cleaner battlefield than it would have had if every allegation had been combined. There is another reason people are watching closely. Durk has been in federal custody since his October 2024 arrest. Nearly 2 years have passed since the case first exploded into the rap conversation. Since then, indictments have changed, lawyers have fought over evidence, and the judge has drawn a line between the upcoming trial and newer allegations. This is no longer just celebrity gossip. The legal consequences are real, and every new filing can change what a jury is allowed to hear. That makes the July ruling more significant than another headline claiming Durk got hit with charges. He did face new allegations, but the judge has now ruled that those charges will not be tried alongside the August case. One more twist matters. A severed case can come back later. If the government proceeds with the racketeering counts, Durk could still have another courtroom fight after the first trial. Even if the August case ends, the legal story may continue. The judge has separated the battles. He has not erased the second one. Now consider the King-Von connection. Fans can debate Von's death, but this case must be understood through prosecutors' allegations and the court's rulings. The ruling does not establish guilt or rewrite the facts surrounding Von's death. What it establishes is concrete. Lil Durk's August 20th federal trial is moving forward on the remaining charges, while the newly added racketeering allegations have been pushed into a separate legal track. That is the development to watch. Because now the question is not whether the case got bigger. It did. The question is whether the prosecution can win the first courtroom battle with the evidence it is allowed to bring before the jury. The biggest mistake you can make with Lil Durk's case right now is thinking the July courtroom win means the legal storm is over. It does not. On July 14th, Federal Judge Michael Fitzgerald ruled that 2 newly added racketeering counts would be tried separately from the murder-for-hire case scheduled for August 20th. That was a significant victory for Durk's defense, but it came with a detail that is easy to miss. The charges were severed, not dismissed. They can still come back in another trial. And that changes the story immediately. Prosecutors had added those racketeering allegations in June, arguing that Durk was connected to a broader alleged criminal enterprise. The government pointed to violence and other alleged activity in Chicago and Atlanta as evidence it wanted a jury to consider. Durk's lawyers fought back, arguing that these allegations were being added too late and would make the upcoming trial unfairly complicated. Instead of allowing prosecutors to combine everything into one massive courtroom narrative, Fitzgerald separated the new racketeering counts from the August case. That means the jury coming in August will not be asked to decide every allegation the government has raised. The immediate trial is narrower than the case prosecutors tried to build with the latest indictment. But here is where the situation gets much more serious. The August trial still centers on the federal allegations involving an alleged murder-for-hire plot targeting Quando Rondo in Los Angeles in 2022. Prosecutors allege the plot resulted in the death of Rondo's cousin, Xavier Robinson. Durk has pleaded not guilty and has denied the allegations through his defense. So when people online say the judge beat the case, for him, that is not what happened. The judge made a pretrial ruling about what charges will be tried together. Now bring King Von back into the conversation carefully, because this is where social media can blur facts and speculation. Prosecutors' broader theory has involved alleged retaliation connected to Von's 2020 killing. But the July ruling did not prove a new theory about Von's death, and it did not establish that Durk was responsible for it. What it did was separate allegations that prosecutors wanted to use to support their broader enterprise narrative. That distinction matters. Because now prosecutors have to walk into the August courtroom with the evidence allowed in that trial and convince 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt. They cannot simply rely on the emotional weight of every controversy surrounding Durk, OTF, or King Von. The jury has to decide the charges actually before it. And there is another development you need to know. On July 31st, prosecutors filed a 4th superseding indictment. According to the filing discussed by people following the case, that filing was procedural rather than a brand new accusation against Durk. Prosecutors were correcting the structure of a stalking count after determining that multiple alleged victims in one count could create a legal problem. In other words, the paperwork changed, But that should not be confused with prosecutors suddenly discovering an entirely new crime. That is exactly why this case is so easy to misunderstand online. Every new indictment sounds like a bombshell, but not every new filing means the same thing. Some filings add allegations. Some clarify charges. Some separate counts. Some simply fix legal wording. If you want to understand what is actually happening, you have to look past the headline. And the timing is getting intense. Durk has been in federal custody since his October 2024 arrest. Nearly 2 years later, the case is finally moving toward a scheduled August 20th trial on the remaining charges. His defense has spent a long time preparing for that courtroom, and the judge's severance ruling means the immediate fight is now more focused. But focused does not mean easy. The prosecution still has to prove its allegations. The defense still has to challenge the government's evidence. And after the August trial, the severed racketeering counts could potentially create another legal battle. That is the twist people need to understand. Durk may have won the fight over what the August jury gets to hear, but he has not escaped the larger case. The courtroom has simply been split into separate battles. The August trial remains scheduled, the racketeering counts remain pending separately, and Durk remains presumed innocent. Unless a jury finds him guilty. Now the clock is getting louder. Lil Durk's federal trial is scheduled to begin on August 20th in Los Angeles, as years of allegations, motions, and courtroom battles finally meet a jury. But there is a fresh development. Prosecutors filed a superseding indictment on July 31st. That sounds like another explosive charge. It is not. The government changed the structure of a stalking count because prosecutors believed combining multiple alleged victims in one count could create a legal problem. It did not add a brand new criminal allegation. That distinction is important because the internet has been treating every new indictment like a new bombshell. The reality is more complicated. The government already tried to expand the case with additional racketeering-related allegations, and Judge Michael Fitzgerald separated 2 of those counts from the August trial. Now the latest filing is largely about cleaning up the charging language. In other words, the courtroom story is getting more complicated on paper while the August trial remains focused on the charges the judge allowed to move forward. And this brings us back to the central allegation. Prosecutors accused Durk of participating in a murder-for-hire scheme aimed at Quando Rondo in Los Angeles in 2022. Rondo survived, but his cousin Xavier Robinson was killed. Durk has pleaded not guilty and maintains his innocence. The government still has to prove its case to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Headlines cannot do that for them. Neither can online theories about King Von, OTF, or anything else surrounding the case. Here is where the King Von connection becomes emotionally powerful but legally complicated. Prosecutors have alleged that the Los Angeles attack was connected to retaliation for Von's 2020 killing. That alleged motive is central to how the government has described the case. But a motive is not the same thing as proof that a defendant committed a crime. The jury will have to evaluate the evidence presented in court, and Durk's defense will challenge the government's interpretation. Now consider what the judge's severance ruling actually accomplished. The defense successfully prevented the newly added Chicago-related racketeering allegations from being tried alongside the Los Angeles case. That means prosecutors cannot simply walk into the August courtroom and present every alleged incident they have connected to Durk as one giant narrative. The immediate trial has boundaries. For the defense, that can be important because jurors will be asked to focus on the charges before them. But there is a second side to that victory. The severed counts were not dismissed. They remain pending and could potentially be tried later. So if you are thinking, Durk beat the new charges, slow down. That is not what the judge ruled. Durk won a battle over when and where those allegations will be heard. The larger legal fight is still alive. And that creates the most interesting question heading into August 20th. What happens if the prosecution wins the first courtroom battle but still has the separate counts waiting? Or what happens if the defense wins the Los Angeles case and then has to confront another trial? The severance means the outcome of one courtroom battle does not automatically erase the other. So when you see another headline saying, Lil Durk hit with new charges. Do not stop at the headline. Ask what changed. Was something actually added? Was an existing count rewritten? Was it dismissed? Was it severed? Those words can completely change what happens next. Right now, the facts are striking enough without exaggeration. The August 20th trial remains scheduled. 2 newer racketeering-related counts were separated from that trial rather than dismissed. The July 31st filing addressed the structure of a stalking allegation rather than announcing a brand new crime. And the King Von connection remains part of the prosecution's alleged motive narrative, not a new finding of guilt. That is where the next major twist could come from, the courtroom itself. Once jury selection begins, the story moves away from internet speculation and toward evidence, witnesses, arguments, and rulings. And that is when we may finally learn whether the government's theory can survive without the extra allegations it wanted the jury to hear. The courtroom clock is almost out, and Lil Durk's case has reached the stage where every filing can change everything. Federal prosecutors filed a 4th superseding indictment on July 31st, before the scheduled August 20th trial. But before you believe posts saying Durk suddenly picked up an entirely new criminal case, the latest filing split one stalking allegation into 2 counts. It is a legal change, but it is not the same as prosecutors discovering a brand new crime. That distinction matters because a new count number can sound more dramatic than the actual legal change, especially online. The government had a combined stalking allegation involving Quando Rondo and the death of Rondo's cousin, Xavier Robinson. Prosecutors separated those allegations into distinct counts. One involves alleged stalking of Rondo using a dangerous weapon, while another concerns alleged stalking resulting in Robinson's death. That moved Durk's listed charges from 6 to 7, but the story is more complicated than the number 7 makes it sound. And this is why the August trial needs to be understood separately from the newer racketeering allegations. On July 14th, Judge Michael Fitzgerald granted Durk's request to sever 2 recently added racketeering-related counts from the Los Angeles trial. Those counts were not dismissed. They remain pending and could potentially be tried later. Durk scored a procedural victory, but the broader case remains. The government can still pursue those counts later, so the allegations remain pending. Now consider the prosecution's case. The government alleges that Durk participated in a murder-for-hire plot targeting Quando Rondo in 2022. The alleged attack did not kill Rondo. His cousin Xavier Robinson was killed. Durk has pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence. The prosecution still has to prove its allegations beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. And here comes the King Von connection. Prosecutors allege the Los Angeles attack was connected to retaliation for Von's 2020 killing. That motive is why Von's name keeps returning. But prosecutors making an allegation does not make it a proven fact. The jury will evaluate the admissible evidence and decide whether the government meets its burden. The severance ruling could become strategically important. Prosecutors wanted broader allegations involving Chicago and other incidents connected to the case. Durk's defense argued that adding those allegations late would make preparation harder and could unfairly influence the jury. Judge Fitzgerald agreed to separate the 2 racketeering counts. The August battle will be narrower. But narrower does not mean easy for the defense. The remaining case includes serious allegations, including murder in aid of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder for hire, interstate facilities used in an alleged murder for hire resulting in death, stalking-related allegations, and a firearms charge. The government must present evidence supporting those counts. Durk's lawyers will challenge that evidence and defend Durk. That could make the august jury's job more focused, even though the remaining charges are serious. Now there is another twist before trial. The judge has scheduled final motions before jury selection. Prosecutors and defense attorneys are expected to argue over what evidence should be allowed, what should be excluded, and how the case will be presented. The story could change before opening statements. The timeline explains the complexity. Durk was arrested in October 2024. Since then, the case has gone through multiple indictments, allegations, defense motions, and fights over what prosecutors can bring before a jury. Now, after nearly 2 years, the scheduled trial is approaching with some of the government's newest racketeering allegations pushed onto a separate track. That creates a strange situation. The defense gets a cleaner August trial, but the severed charges remain hanging over Durk. Prosecutors lose the ability to put everything into one narrative at once, but they still get to pursue the original Los Angeles allegations. The King Von connection remains an alleged motive, not proof. So watch the August 13th motions hearing, the evidence rulings, and whether prosecutors can build their case without relying heavily on the allegations the judge separated. Once jury selection begins, internet theories become secondary. The evidence becomes the story. And after all the headlines, that is the moment when Lil Durk's future will be placed in the hands of a jury. So now I want to hear from you, because this is where the story gets even more complicated. Do you think the latest developments actually help Lil Durk's defense? Or did prosecutors simply move the fight into another courtroom? Because remember what just happened. 2 racketeering-related counts were separated from the upcoming Los Angeles trial. That sounds like a major win for the defense, but those allegations were not dismissed. They can still come back later. And then prosecutors filed another superseding indictment, changing the structure of the stalking allegations. So what do you think happens next? Does the August trial become harder for the prosecution because the broader allegations cannot all be presented together? Or does the government still have enough evidence from the original case to convince a jury? And then there is the King Von connection. Prosecutors have alleged that the 2022 Los Angeles attack was connected to retaliation surrounding Von's 2020 killing. But that remains an allegation, not a proven fact, and Durk has pleaded not guilty. That distinction is important. So I want your prediction, not the internet rumor, not somebody's comment section theory, but your actual read on the situation. Does Lil Durk beat the August case? Or do prosecutors finally get the conviction they have been fighting for? Drop your prediction below. And tell me something else. If the severed racketeering charges eventually go to another trial, do you think that could become an even bigger legal battle? Because that possibility has not disappeared. The August courtroom is only one piece of this story. If you want the next update when the judge makes another major ruling, when prosecutors reveal new evidence, or when the trial finally begins, stay locked in. Because after everything that has happened since Durk's 2024 arrest, this case is finally reaching the moment everyone has been waiting for. And this time, it will not be decided by social media. It will be decided by evidence. It will be decided by arguments. And ultimately, it will be decided by a jury. Until then, keep your eyes on the courtroom, not the rumors. Because the next filing could change the entire story again.